It's important to know that there are what's called the 8 deadly words for a story, and it goes like this: I don't care what happens to these people, or alternatively, I don't care what happens to these people. After a successful test run with Show by Rock, I decided to try something interesting and different. And that ended up being Big Order. Well, teach me to try anything new. I'm not the only person who's completely tired of syscom in anime, right? Like having a sister complex? Because that seems to be entirely what Big Order is predicated upon. And before I get too far into that, let me just start off by saying that Big Order is bad. It's astonishingly bad, actually. It's full of all that crap that anime just needs to fucking knock off already. And seriously, the syscom is only the tip of the shitberg here. But of course, I have to explain the basic premise before I really get into what makes this garbage. So it's after Armageddon, and superhumans called Orders have shown up. People don't like Orders for the obvious reason that they're humans with nearly unstoppable and uncontrollable powers. Some Order went off the rails, and a whole lot of people died 10 years prior. In this situation, we have our protagonist, Eiji Hoshimiya, who seems to be responsible for the tragedy of 10 years ago, and has promised himself that he would never use his powers again. His sister Sena is always sick with an unknowable illness because her role in this anime is basically as a catalyst to the goings-on. She is a sexy lamp. And even then, she's not terribly sexy, folks. He's got a syscom, she's got a brother-com, and I really just want them both to give each other a big hug and then jump off a cliff. There are a pair of stereotypes that are so very uninteresting, and it's the first sign of trouble for Big Order. And you know, it's funny, because at this point I was actually hoping that Big Order would be about servers at a restaurant, because that would have been far more interesting than this piece of crap. Some people know about Eiji's powers, and those same some people send Rin Kurenai, who is a regenerator, after him and forces Eiji to use his powers, which includes basically rewriting the script. He can dominate reality in a certain area of the world, and that's a pretty impressive power to have. It's also entirely dependent on the writers having any idea how powerful that really is. So instead of fixing the problems immediately with carefully and well thought out uses of said power, Eiji is a character who is thicker than pig shit and couldn't order his way out of a paper bag. This is a fundamental flaw with stories like this, and it sometimes can be done really well, like in The Matrix, or it can be Big Order. And let's face it, The Matrix kind of just relied on gunplay when it could have done something far, far more interesting. When you have a character that can bend reality, you immediately find the problem that, guess what, you have to hamstring them somehow, and the easiest way to do that is have them be as dumb as a box of sticks. Eiji and Rin have it out, and he ends up using his domination powers on her, which is about where I lost him as a character. See, he's basically been proven to be too dangerous to exist, and now he's also removed Rin's autonomy as a human being because he's careless and just a tick short of being evil. So now they're stuck together permanently. She can't kill him because of his domination power, but she really wants to, and boy, let me tell you, I'm there with her. Oh, and now they're gonna fall in love or some shit because of proximity or something. It's like these men who wrote this show have never been around a woman. It's just kind of disgusting. This is all some sad nerd's wish fulfillment. The writing in this series is beyond bad. It's the kind of awful that never should have gotten off the ground, let alone a manga and a 10-episode show. Ugh. God, imagining this as anything more than a 10-episode series is making my stomach churn. Ugh. So after he uses his power and literally erases another person's autonomy, he gets snatched up by an evil organization who wants to use him to take over the world. And because Eiji isn't sharp enough to think his way out of it, he's forced to go along with their plans, even though he's got the ability to bend reality to his whims. How hard is the word no? Or in this case, order? Disband and forget about me entirely. This would essentially solve the main conceit of the story. So of course they can't do it because they have to keep the story going, even though the story is crap. But from there the show gets into some really weird edgelord stuff where they try to be Code Geass and fail, and then set up Eiji to get hit with a nuclear weapon, but he manages to dominate other people into doing his dirty work for him. Also, there's some fucking 10-year-old whose ability is to literally stop nuclear weapons.
How did they figure out that she can stop nuclear weapons with her power? I mean, how do you come up with how do you test for something like hey ooh
So here's the thing. If you want a villain-like protagonist, don't half-ass it. Make him evil, or at the very least willing to manipulate people into doing his dirty work. If you have that kind of power set, it should match the personality at least a little bit. And in this case, the show is not well written enough to actually merit having a mismatched power set. He really should have been more outwardly unlikable, but he's presented in such a way that we're clearly supposed to say, oh, poor little kid with vaguely defined superpowers, oh, you're so cute, yes he is. Asshole protagonists work just fine here. He's just callous enough to seem like an emotionally stunted dope, but not callous enough to make him seem like an active manipulator. And you need him to be overly malicious to have any character development by the end of the saga. Or, you could just throw the whole thing out and spare us the stupidity of it. But, obviously that didn't happen.
So it's possible to write your characters in such a way that they are still villainous or unlikable, but still watchable. Lena Inverse, for example, is kind of evil. Alucard is only a hero because what he fights are way worse than he is. But those are characters who have redeeming qualities and are written in such a way that you get to see what makes them tick. What makes AG tick seems to be syscom, mixed with a guilt complex, so he's all sorts of screwball, with a healthy dose of dumbass layered on top of it. He's like a layer cake made of shit. The way these characters are introduced to us usually gives them tragic backstories, but does not give us any real reason to care other than that they're sad. It's just sort of implied that you should care without doing any real work to make it happen. So you're left either forcing your own investment, which, trust me, is totally not worth it, or falling naturally into the old adage of, I don't care what happens to these people. The organization that they're hooked up with is comprised of a bunch of characters with powers who aren't really worth remembering, so I didn't bother, and frankly, you'll forget about them too. The only one of note is Io, who has a bunny girl hair ribbon that can't be touched by a man, because if they are touched by a man, she loses her powers and then gets pregnant on the spot. I don't know if you guys remember, ninth grade biology, but that's not how this shit works. But anyway, of course, Eiji touches it and fucks her entire existence up. Oh, and it's played for laughs, because there's nothing funnier than unwanted pregnancies, I guess. He also fights a woman who can manipulate rocks that are full of malice and hate for Eiji, whose essential function is only really to be really busty and grope the other girls when she joins his side. Obnoxious writing is the order of the day on Big Order. This is an anime that people who make fun of anime point to and say, see, this is what I'm talking about. It's weird, it's got some fucked up kinks behind it, and the author's idea of what is a good story clearly didn't extend past being 15 years old. It's the same problem with Triage X, except Triage X is hilariously stupid. This is just annoyingly stupid. The art is pretty at least, but that doesn't save a terrible story from being terrible. The show is artistically very solid, but it's so conceptually bankrupt and the art direction is so shallow that the camera work just seems like an afterthought. It's visually uninteresting, which makes it fit in with the rest of the show. So here's the part of the episode where I talk about spoilers because I feel like it will help put a finer point on why I think this show is garbage. You have been warned. Jump ahead to the listed time to avoid spoilers, but realistically, you probably want to hear this. Alright, anybody who wanted to leave is probably gone by this point, so here it goes. I reviewed Clanad a long time ago, and while I did like it fairly well, I did have a problem with one of the twists on the characters. That character relied on you to be lied to by the story to make it impactful, and this is both intellectually dishonest and proof of a writer searching for tragedy. Big Order does a similar thing, where it's revealed that the Order responsible for the world's destruction 10 years ago was actually Senna, and the power that Eiji has isn't his power at all. He's just able to copy it off of her using his Order. He did something accidentally selfless here, but then goes on to erase Senna's memory and his own to cover it all up as a 10-year-old, or prepubescent child, whatever the case may be. This twist comes in the second to last episode, and it makes me want to scream with how utterly unoriginal it is. It basically takes everything we know about the character and the world at this point and tosses it out the window,
And it makes Eiji this self-righteous manipulator from the start, and to make it all worse, relies on pulling the rug out of what little audience must remain to make it even remotely work. If you have this, you need to have dropped hints like this all over the show. It just feels like a badly written show at this point, not the kind of show that has some deep mystery behind it. But hey, Santa still loves him, so I guess that's all good for your stupid sitcom wank material, huh? There's no real redeeming qualities here for any of these characters at this point. Either they're just yanked along by the script, or they're there to be a sexy lamp. And it turns out that it was Lamp's fault all along. The resolution is not a satisfactory way of ending things incidentally, since Eiji finally uses his powers in the right way and reboots the whole world, which, let's face it, he should have done in the first place. Welcome back if you skipped the spoilers, by the way. Characters who have extreme powers are boring. This is why people think Superman is not interesting. And frankly, it's why most people who are writing Superman action stories aren't really doing a great job with it. However, when you put limits on that character, then you have to work within those constraints. If you give a character unlimited deity-like powers, who fucking cares? If you give a character extreme powers, but with these very set limitations on them, like they can only use it at night, or the stars have to align properly, then that becomes a point of tension because their powers can short out all of a sudden. That's why Ultraman is interesting, because he's got the 3-minute timer. Big Order is not a show for you if you like things like character development, well thought out characterization, interesting designs, or basically anything that makes anime worth watching. And I'm positive that there's some sort of pervert defense force out there for it, but honestly, I don't want to hear about it.
Okay, that was mean. I'm trying to get into the habit of offering improvements for series that I review if I give them the boot, but here's the thing. If they'd given Eiji the power to change the world and had everyone vying for his ability by trying to pull him one way or the other, that'd have been interesting, if a little dull because of a lack of agency on Eiji's part. Like if he can only use his powers once. If you'd made him an affable but otherwise villainous character, then that'd give a little bit more freedom to work with. But he's just a snot-nosed little scrub who looks like every other goddamn anime character out there. When the only thing keeping the plot going is the author's unwillingness to make his character enact the solution to his problem, then the show is just wasting our time. The problem here is that the solution is simple and elegant. He uses his order power to reboot the planet back before orders showed up, and then blocks orders from existing. Why not? Nobody said he couldn't. Or at the very least, nothing in the show gave him a block on it. Problem solved. So, at the end of the day, is Big Order worth watching? No. Very no. And if I were actually inclined to do so, I'm sure this is the part of the show where, oh no, a Spike would come up and I'd suddenly be talking about how, oh no, Big Order's great. But you know what? It doesn't actually merit me doing that gag. There are hundreds of better shows to watch out there, better things to do with your time. And the only saving grace for Big Order is that it's only 10 episodes long. Think of all the things you could do with 5 hours, and make sure that watching Big Order is not on the list. Healthy. Honey, I can't say healthy.
Healthy?
Yeah, that.